We saw the world for its boundless potential, and looked at each day with a sparkle in our eyes that eventually dies out as we get older. That's what people tend to think anyway, but that's not entirely accurate. The complexity of our day-to-day lives changes as we get older. One day we're worried about finals and understanding the changes we're going through. The next, we're constantly paying off expenses like rent, insurance, and filing our taxes. Adulthood is a never-ending battle against time, circumstance, and oftentimes, ourselves. I'm not a fan of the idea that cynicism is the natural consequence of self-awareness and maturation. I feel like that's a reductive way to look at the world. Believing that things can change and be better is an essential element for a lot of people to find the strength to go forward. I don't think we lose that optimism for the future over time. Maybe we just get really caught up with our responsibilities and forget. But if there's something I've learned throughout my adulthood, it's that you can always find your way back to that feeling. Today we're diving into Tokusatsu and Power Rangers, and thinking about how simple children's shows remind us of the strength of the human spirit and its desire to chase a better future. As a kid, I used to stay with my family friends after school because both my parents worked during the day. After a long day of playing on the playground and pretending I care about math problems, I got to walk home with my friends and stay at their place to watch cartoons until I got picked up after my mom finished work. Of all the things I can remember watching as a kid, two things stood out to me. The first was Star Wars, but it's kind of hard to avoid one of the biggest science fiction properties ever conceived. The other is Power Rangers, a show about a group of unlikely heroes banding together, morphing into spandex-wearing superheroes that beat up the bad guys each week. Everything about Power Rangers is simple, but as I argued in my previous video about one-liners, simplicity is not synonymous with being thoughtless or pointless. Sometimes the point is just to have fun while learning simple life lessons. Power Rangers is an American adaptation of a long-standing superhero meta-series called Super Sentai. Sentai just means task force or squadron, and it used to be used in military context, but its usage here is about a band of superheroes fighting against the forces of evil. Super Sentai falls under the genre of Tokusatsu, which just means special effects, but you might be surprised about its origins. Let's turn back the clock to understand the origins of Toku, and what that means for the genre. Tokusatsu has roots in very early Japanese theatre, building on top of the legacies of kabuki and puppet theatre, but our modern understanding of Tokusatsu emerged in the 1950s. Following the end of US occupation in Japan, a live-action film named Gojira, or Godzilla, would release in Japanese theatres in the year 1954, drawing inspiration from the 1933 film King Kong. The story surrounds an ancient creature from the sea called Gojira, as it's disturbed from its rest by hydrogen bomb testing conducted by the United States. The ensuing havoc faced by Japan is only stopped when a weapon of similar destructive force is used to stop Gojira. After the weapon is used on the King of the Monsters, its secret is buried with its creator, who sacrifices himself to protect humanity from further tragedy at the hands of weapons of mass destruction. Gojira had three game-changing qualities in my eyes. Firstly, it spawned the kaiju media subgenre, where giant monsters are focal points of a story. Secondly, it serves as a powerful allegory for the scars that WMDs leave behind on humanity, considering that it ends with an explicit anti-nuclear message that taps into the trauma of post-war Japan. Thirdly, the movie made use of quite advanced practical effects, costumes, and puppets, which laid the foundation for the future of Japanese television and blockbuster cinema. Gojira would make its way stateside 2 years later as Godzilla, King of the Monsters, with the added caveat that the plot had largely been scrubbed of the political subtext of the original film, combined with an English dub and the inclusion of original characters to stitch everything together. While I'm not the biggest fan of the American cut, its creation is likely the main reason that Godzilla has a strong influence outside of Japan despite the apparent concessions made to localize it. Godzilla would spawn over 30 movies and become a cultural touchstone for Japanese culture, and its creation is a straight path to modern Toku. Years after the first Godzilla movie, special effects director Eiji Tsuburaya was tasked with bringing his talents to the small screen by Toho. To that end, Tsuburaya repurposed old kaiju costumes in order to streamline the process of creating new monsters for TV audiences. In January 1966, Ultra Q released as a black and white Monster of the Week TV show, where different kaiju would feature in each episode while the protagonists investigate them. While its importance isn't immediately obvious, it laid the groundwork for Tsuburaya's next series that would change media all over the world. Tokusatsu saw a massive shift with the release of Ultraman, which released immediately after Ultra Q ended in July of 1966. Ultra Q's format could be likened to something like The Twilight Zone or X-Files, but Ultraman was different. It was filmed in color on one hand, but the narrative focus shifted to a setting where there is indeed a monster of the week, but it does battle with a humanoid protector called Ultraman. The identity of Ultraman is a human named Shin Hayata, who is given the power to transform into Ultraman after the actual Ultraman from the distant land of light accidentally kills him while pursuing an escaped kaiju. While I could say that Ultraman simply introduced the concepts of transformation sequences, transformation devices, signature moves, and fighting big monsters, that would be an oversimplification. Ultraman, like much of the Japanese media that follows it, is about giving children hope for the future and exploring ideas that heroes can tackle to keep that hope alive. It's been some time since I watched it, but I recall a few episodes focusing specifically on how kaiju deaths can be handled with dignity, and how the main characters of the show were able to deter conflict in scenarios that didn't require Ultraman to kill them. Many kids' shows convey ideas that are complex in ways that are digestible to children, because it's not that kids can't understand complex topics, it's that trying to explain them in the most complicated way possible is going to be meaningless for the audience. Many stories are about concepts like resilience, forgiveness, conflict resolution, and working through hardship in ways that are easy to process for people who might need those skills for their classmates or their friends on the playground. Parents teach children complicated concepts all the time, even though they ask increasingly difficult questions that are often jarring for their parents to answer. I'm sure most people are getting a lot of whiplash when they hear questions like, why do some people hurt others? Or, why don't we have a lot of money? And their parents have to do their best to try and give a satisfying answer to their inquisitive child. Naturally, I don't think that all media needs to be deep or complicated, especially not when kids are just trying to have fun watching something. Superhero media tends to have an important lesson at the end of each episode, even if it's very basic advice to adults who've already learned these things. Oftentimes, the moral of the story is as simple as, if you make a mistake, you can get someone to help you fix it, before it causes more problems. But that doesn't mean you can't tell it in an interesting way. Inevitably, some geniuses will say, how can we trust media from post-war Japan? But those people aren't interested in having a serious dialogue about media and historical context, since this level of suspicion is rarely raised against media produced in Cold War era Hollywood. I'm just gonna shelve that because it's just a distraction at best. Ultraman series are still being made to this day, and notable creators in video games and anime that you may know grew up with it shaping part of their childhoods. You may have seen Ultraman's international influence in things like Ant-Man's MCU design, Ben 10's time limit, as well as the creation of Pacific Rim since Del Toro is a huge fan. Ultraman is the blueprint for modern Toku, and MusicArea's work established audiences' expectations as well as industry standards for what it means to make Toku. You've got practical effects, big monsters, and most importantly, you have children across the nation cheering for your victory. In the 70s, the Toku genre would see two more titans joining the fray, with Kamen Rider and Super Sentai making an entrance. Kamen Rider, or Mask Rider, began in 1971, depicting a world that is besieged by a global terrorist organization named Shocker, which is built from Nazi remnants, with plans for world domination. Shocker kidnaps people to convert their bodies into mutant cyborgs, which are brainwashed to do Shocker's bidding. The protagonist Takeshi Hongo is kidnapped because of his 600 IQ and his immense physical strength, but he is saved by the missing professor Dr. Hiroshi Midorikawa, who frees him before his brainwashing is complete. Takeshi learns of the true nature of Shocker, and his resolve pushes him forward to become Kamen Rider, a hero that transforms with his Typhoon belt to protect the freedom of mankind. Something I've always appreciated about Kamen Rider series is how the forces of good and evil often use the same technology to fight their battles. Even if it's unintended, it gives the impression that heroes and villains are differentiated by how they use power as opposed to some fundamental qualities about them. It's not as simple as being chosen or being naturally evil. A few years after Kamen Rider debuted, we got Super Sentai. The first Sentai series is called Himitsu Sentai Go Ranger, and it released in 1975. Its title in English is literally Secret Squadron Go Ranger. Many seasons would feature teams of varying sizes and suit colors, and the team names vary a lot from series to series. Sentai shows often have multicolored teams which have a specific motif or theme. Each team usually has mechas, and they usually have a specific name convention that reflects the motif. Super Sentai has been going on for about 48 years, and there are still different themes for so many different groups of heroes. Because while we may grow tired of seeing transformation sequences and mecha in some cases, there is never really a shortage of children that enjoy watching their favorite heroes battle the forces of evil. As the years go by, children continually have heroes to cheer for as they fight big kaiju, continuing the legacy that began with Godzilla and the game-changing kaiju battles that captured the hearts of a nation. If you're not in franchise with one of these shows, it's probably tempting to say that Toku is a bit of a content mill since they make one new one every year, and with that comes a host of new toys to sell. Perhaps a lot of it is about selling toys and making money, but that perspective minimizes the cultural impact of shows like this. Trying to decouple a profit motive from the message of the show is pretty easy when you just accept that a lot of art is made within capitalism. I'd say that selling toys and continuing to make these shows is a symbiotic relationship, since very little mainstream media gets made for free, unfortunately. Overall, we're more interested in the cultural impact than we are the ethics of children's television merchandising. So that's all I really gotta say about that in particular. Whether it's the idea of battling against evil or the power of friendship, they're recurring writing tropes because they're fun and enjoyable regardless of how many times it's been done before. With a genuine belief in your concept, it will be memorable to your audience, especially the children these shows are made for. The creation of Gojira, his kaiju pals, Ultraman, Kamen Rider, and Super Sentai are all a reflection of art in post-war Japan. These works demonstrate how hope can still flourish despite the scars of war left by Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You can say whatever you want about the Japanese Imperial Army, I've not once defended anything they engaged in. I'm just reminding you that the bombing of those cities put an entire world on notice, elucidating the sheer terror of nuclear weaponry. And honestly, the legacy of nukes is a geopolitical fear that plagues humanity to this very day. Despite the ugliness of nuclear warfare, children were still allowed to dream, still told to feel hope and cheer for heroes, not because they needed to become nationalist patriots, but because every child in the world should be allowed to feel joy and happiness. They should be allowed to dream up a beautiful future and enjoy the wonders of life as opposed to living out trauma that war brings. If that means cheering on Kamen Rider as he leaps into the air and kicks down a tyrant, then hell yeah. That's something to celebrate. That's something worth smiling about. Hiroshi Fujioka, who plays Takeshi Hongo, the first Kamen Rider, once said that children are the treasures of the future. That's why he enjoys seeing their smiling faces. He also said that doing something for the benefit of others brings a lot of power and capability to the human body. Heroes in fiction don't have to be propaganda tools. They're at their best when they're just about being good people. The powers in a lot of stories are pretense, but the moral qualities of characters in fiction are things that you can strive to be. This kind of idea is exemplified by characters like Superman. I feel like the legacy of Super Sentai, Kamen Rider, and Ultraman is one of hope for the future, and children all over the world have been changed by that because they can cheer for heroes as they fight the forces of evil, while also fighting to do the right thing and improve themselves in the process. It really doesn't get any easier than that. Now that we've rapid-fired through an abridged history of Toku, it's time to return where we began, the Power Rangers. There's a lot that can be said about Power Rangers as a franchise, but let's start at the beginning. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers is an American adaptation of Kyoryu Sentai Zyuranger, which means Dinosaur Squad Zyuranger. Zyuranger was a game changer because it had more than 5 team members and it featured animal motifs as well as the idea of mecha being sentient beings as opposed to just vehicles. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers is iconic for a number of reasons, but people tend to remember the sheer drip of the early 90s, the badassery of Tommy Oliver, the legendary Green Ranger, and this show paved the way for a lot of hero-themed media outside of comics to gain a foothold on television. While Ultraman and Kamen Rider wouldn't gain much of a foothold in the West, the Power Rangers have avoided being scrapped entirely despite being 30 years old. Power Rangers tell stories about good versus evil, about becoming better people, being better teammates, and giving children heroes to cheer for. The lessons we learn from shows like Power Rangers can vary from be kind to your friends to set aside your differences and work together as a team. The messages are a bit formulaic, but if you drop the pretense of being too smart or too grown for that, there's always a lot of fun to be had. As kids, you're watching and cheering on your heroes as they work through new challenges every week, and while the lessons are simple, you know what isn't? The joy and wonder that children carry with them. They take those simple lessons and they take them to heart. Children are great at playing pretend because they know how to apply their creativity to imagine big and interesting worlds for their friends to play in. When they learn these seemingly simple lessons at the end of an episode, they're not just hearing some generic advice they've already heard. They're seeing applied examples for problem solving that the heroes go through when they face challenges. One of my favorite episodes of Power Rangers is the pilot for Power Rangers Lost Galaxy. Our Red Ranger is a sketchy fella whose life is in shambles, and when it comes time to figure out who the chosen ones are, it's not Leo that's the chosen one, but his brother Mike. Before Mike falls to his apparent death, Leo is given the Quasar Saber to become the Red Galaxy Ranger. I like this spin on the Chosen One myth, because Leo is not an idealized person. He's not the complete ace who's great at everything. He's a flawed individual that his brother believes in. While the sword doesn't choose him, its wielder, his brother, does, because he trusts Leo, and he sees the good in him despite being the more successful brother. While it's not groundbreaking or life-changing to us as adults, when we're children watching that kind of concept where it deviates from story tropes, that's always a great thing. It teaches children not to judge people for their imperfections or flaws, and encourages you to be patient and understanding with each person and how they differ from us, and our expectations. I'm not just saying that to make it sound deep, it really was a cool spin on the perfect Red Ranger idea that a lot of series might lean into. Overall, Power Rangers Lost Galaxy is one of my favorite seasons, so if you can take a bit of campy dialogue and some old school aesthetics, you'd probably have fun with it if you started watching the series from there. I think that the Power Rangers were my heroes growing up because I really loved the color green, so I always loved pretending to be the Green Ranger at school. I always had big dreams as a kid. I wanted to be an artist, an architect, a scientist, and all this other stuff. I'm still figuring out where I'm going as an adult, but I've never permanently lost faith in the idea that the future can be better. Shows like Power Rangers get you to cheer for heroes on the screen, to learn as our heroes overcome their obstacles, and all of this captures a really pure experience of balancing cool aesthetics with good vibes. To me, Power Rangers doesn't have to be deep, meaningful, and complicated. I think that even if fun is the only outcome, it's still worth something because it helps pass that time, and it etches itself into the memories of happy children who believe in heroes. It's not just the messages or the historical context of the legacy of Toku that builds all of this up. It's also the visual spectacle of explosions, transformations, and big robots too. The feelings that Power Rangers can give you differ from person to person, but I've always felt that any work of art is worthwhile if it matters to even just one person. Even if that person is just me. If it can move one's soul, whether it's a happy kid or the tired office worker who just got off their 9 to 5, then maybe that's sufficient proof of worth, and we don't really need to interrogate that much further. I know I've smiled at many shows like Power Rangers after work because after a long day of mind-numbing and repetitive work, seeing the Rangers team up and fight against evil never gets old because the childlike joy and wonder that learn to appreciate them never really goes away. You might forget about that feeling as you grow older, but it's never gone forever. That's not nostalgia speaking, that's just part of you that recognizes what it means to enjoy simple fun. Sometimes life just gets complicated and all the responsibilities and unpredictable crap distract you from being able to enjoy the simple things as often as you might like. I've definitely been through plateaus in life, but it's always important to come back to your roots and maybe rediscover the simple joys that life has to offer. Dreams can die, plans can change, and awful things can happen. But the indomitable human spirit eventually gains the strength to move forward, to take that crucial step towards the future because the hope that they can find recalls the tale of those heroes that first gave us the strength to move forward. Whether it's your friends, family, or your favorite Power Ranger, believing in something can be enough to help push you in the direction that you want to go. I think that everything can come full circle and lead us back to the simple joys of life, reigniting our hopes for the future and the wondrous world that could be, despite the adversity we face in it. And heroes really do remind me of that. Whether it's the protagonist of a JRPG or your original character in your tabletop campaign, you can find heroes in anything. If the only thing it does is make you crack a smile, then hey, it's still meaningful all the same because it gives you something to believe in. I still have hope for the future, and I still enjoy these kinds of shows, but I wanted to watch something I haven't seen before, to see what it feels like to rediscover the joy that a lot of us tend to lose as we get older. As part of my research for this video's theme, I wanted to look at something with fresh eyes, really watch something new and experience it for the first time, rather than trying to piece things together from nostalgia and having that cloud my judgment. To that end, I started watching Avatar Sentai Donbrothers with my friends, and there's a lot to unpack about its theme, so let's dive into its roots. Momotaro is a popular character from Japanese folklore which acts as the basis for the show's Red Ranger, or the squadron leader. While the tale of Momotaro has numerous variations, the titular Momotaro, or Peach Boy, is born from a giant peach floating down a river, where he is found by an elderly couple who learn that the gods have sent him to be their son. Momo just means peach, and Taro is a name given to the eldest son, so his name is kind of a mishmash of those two words. Some people choose to localize his name as Peach Boy so it makes the idea clearer, but it varies on a case-to-case basis. Once Momotaro grows up into a strong man, he embarks on a journey to defeat ogres that regularly pillage the lands he'd grown up on. He meets a talking dog, a monkey, and a pheasant who he gives dumplings to for aiding him in his quest. Together, they triumph over the ogre forces at the fortress, and Momotaro returns with the treasure and the ogre chieftain captive, having conquered their fort, forcing them to surrender. While I can't understand the cultural nuance of this Japanese folktale, the story itself demonstrates elements of unity and the balance of good and evil. This next fact is wild, but in the late 19th century, Momotaro was commonly portrayed as a propaganda symbol to fuel nationalist attitudes in warfare. Sazanami Iwaya altered the legend to imply that the Ogre Island was the enemies of Japan during the Sino-Japanese War. While this is crazy on its own, when you factor in the fact that Sazanami was a children's author and a government official working as part of the Ministry of Education, you really get a picture for how something so innocent can be twisted for nefarious ends. Despite Momotoro's use in propaganda, I haven't found any proof of modern examples of nationalist messaging using his tale, so I'm going to assume that one's up in the air unless somebody in the comments knows about that. Donbrothers starts out with an elderly man finding a peach floating downstream. Contained within is a young baby implied to be Momotaro. In this world, the bad guys are regular humans that are transformed by their own greed and desires, and the Donbrothers fight against these monsters to restore the balance, while also fending off a separate faction that wishes to eliminate humans that are corrupted by greed. We're introduced to a high school girl named Kito Haruka, who is an award-winning manga author that has her life seemingly turned upside down by unusual forces around her. She brushes with death as these strange monsters start becoming regular fixtures of her life, eventually leading her to become the Oni sister, which is the Yellow Ranger of this team. The next member we meet is Tsuyoshi Kijino, who is a diligent and helpful salaryman that works a generic office job with the highlight of his life being his wife Miho. He's portrayed as a bit of a fail guy, but he's extremely kind and dependable as a person. Kijino is the Pink Squadron member, and his title is Kiji Brother. His design is extremely wacky and surprising at first, but he's based on the pheasant from Momotoro's tale. The Blue Squadron member is named Shinichi Saruhara. He's introduced as this weird poet with no money, but eventually reveals himself as Saru Brother, the monkey-themed member of the team. The Black Squadron member is named Inuzuka Tsubasa, whose title is Inu Brother. He's a fugitive on the run from police, for reasons unknown. He's a tiny little dog-themed hero that has the same proportions as a character from a Sonic game. Each of the members is based on the allies that Momotaro gives dumplings to in exchange for their help triumphing over the Ogre Fortress in his legend. The final member of the squadron is Momoi Taro, the Red Don Brother, called Don Momotaro. Taro is a postman and embraces the bonds he forges with people around him. He can't lie and he always tells people how things should be done while meaning well. He's a helpful and kind man, but he struggles with human connections. It's a surprisingly thoughtful character flaw to give the protagonist of a show, as well as the leader of a team. While I haven't finished the entire series yet, it's fun to watch him learn and grow through the bonds he makes with people every episode. Now that we have our 5 heroes, you should note that none of them know about each other's identities. Taro seems to know about everyone connected to him, but everyone else is oblivious to the fact that the strangers they've come across are their allies that help battle against the forces of evil. As I was watching this show with my friends, I wasn't trying my hardest to figure out or predict how the plot would go. I kinda just let it play out and took things for what they were, so I could approach everything with an open mind. In the second episode of Donbrothers, we meet Taro's co-workers at his delivery job and we see how people can manipulate him through his inability to lie. Accordingly, they ask him what he's going to use in rock paper scissors before battling him to win in rock paper scissors. His co-workers begin complimenting their boss on her youthful appearance despite being well into her 60s. This prompts her to ask Taro how old he thinks she is, and he says that she looks 68 because of his inability to lie, even if they are just white lies to spare somebody's feelings. This upsets her because he is dead on, and she begins lamenting that she wished she could look younger, which leads to her possession by one of the spirits that are drawn to her desire to be young. Having attained new powers, Sanai starts looking like she's in her 30s at most, and her co-workers think that she's Sanai's daughter or something, which makes her very happy. Once again, she asks Taro how old she looks to gauge her youth in his eyes. Once more, he tells her that she looks 68 despite looking a lot younger comparatively. This upsets her greatly. Some more time passes and Sanai becomes even younger, looking maybe a third of her actual age. And Taro once again tells her that she looks 68 despite looking about 25 at most. At this point, you're probably wondering why he says that, but I think Taro just sees people for who they are as people. And he knows what she looks like, so the de-aging power doesn't really change his perception of her as a person. He's not fascinated with the fact that she looks a lot younger, and he certainly cannot lie about it given that he lacks any ability to do so. Sanai's inability to appear younger to Taro drives her to madness. She begins absorbing everyone in the area with her newfound powers, which prompts the Donbrothers to intervene. I could give you the play-by-play of the battle, but it's sufficient to say that Momoi Taro transforms into Don Momotaro, and he has this cool intro where he's carried in by his followers, and he teams up with the other Donbrothers to defeat the monster Sanai in battle. The fight itself is cool, but it's what happens after that really struck a chord with me. After she returns to her normal age, Sanai asks Taro how old she looks. Everyone tries to nudge him to lie, but he tells the truth. He thinks she looks 68 years old, but he elaborates that she looks full of energy and that she looks really happy at her age. Sanai smiles because what Taro says is so sweet, and he smiles from ear to ear because she is happy. don't know why. I'm not even old, but it almost made me cry. Despite his inability to tell white lies and deal with certain social situations, he's just a very kind and empathetic person. He might have trouble lying, but he has no trouble effortlessly helping others and being kind, and I don't know, that just hit really hard for some reason. I can't fully quantify that feeling, it's almost ephemeral. I think that as adults we feel like we've wasted our lives away. People around us are getting mortgages, starting families, and all these other trivial measures for normality that get forced upon us, and it's a lot harder to feel content with anything at any given time. I think it just reminded me of that feeling that so long as you're happy with yourself at any age, maybe nothing else matters. I started to get the feeling that maybe it's always been the case with Red Rangers, that it's not about some perfect quality that a leader has, but it's the actions they take as a leader that make them so special to the teams they're part of. Maybe that's why the bonds they forge with their team is so special. It was in the second episode of this show that I realized an incredibly special story was being told. The message isn't just it's okay if you're old, it's more about stopping to put everything in perspective, appreciating the life that you have. Yeah, maybe I could be richer, maybe I could be more famous or this or that, but those kinds of feelings can repeat an infinite amount. Sometimes we gotta dial it back and just think that, sure, I could have those things, but fixating on that makes me lose sight of the things that do make me happy. Hanging out with my friends, playing games with the boys, having dinner with my family, and all this other seemingly inane stuff all bundled together to make a life that I feel is worth living. When a kid watches this, they don't miss the nuances of that. Kids are plenty emotionally intelligent, they just express their thoughts and feelings differently than we do. I think if I was a kid watching this, I'd be less introspective about each episode, but the message is told in such a simple and effective way that the moral of the story wouldn't be lost on me. I'm watching the Red Ranger battle with his boss who feels insecure about her age, but when she returns the youth she stole from random people, I understand that she still leads a happy life even if she feels insecure from time to time. Something that's very true to the lives that we all lead. Moments of doubt will come and go, but they can never truly take away the lives we've forged for ourselves. It's that simple yet thoughtful writing that pervades so much Toku series that makes them so beloved. I think it's quite easy to mistake simplicity for the absence of substance, and the same logic applies here with Toku and Power Rangers. I think that these shows have a very take what you need from it approach to storytelling, where the overall message is the same, but how we interpret that message changes with our experiences. It's not just pointless projection or drawing a deep message where there isn't one. The reason that stories about the indomitable human spirit and the power of friendship are told time and time again despite being somewhat unoriginal is because telling any story with care will always feel like a journey worth embarking on. Not every idea has to be completely new, nor should they be. A lot of art is iterative and expands on the works that came before it, but the lines are colored in with a new palette to create a work that truly moves people. The fifth episode of Donbrothers is another emotional masterpiece. In this episode, we see Tsubasa on the run from the police, and all the Donbrothers are driven together by coincidences. I should note at this point that they don't know they're a part of the same team still, and they've kind of just been fighting together on a whim because of the powers that they don't really understand. In the previous episode, we learned that Taro was a really hated child because he often had helpful advice, but he lacked any tact in giving it. Even though he always said helpful things, it got so bad that his entire neighborhood moved houses away from him, so his father and him lived alone in their apartment. It's quite the brutal backstory for a child, and honestly, it feels really cruel that this happened to a young boy with bad social skills. It's not like kids are out here theory crafting how to be incredibly insufferable and awful to people. He was kind of just trying to help but didn't know the best way of going about it. So nobody knows why Tsubasa is a fugitive, and they all just assume the worst out of him because they see his face on wanted posters all over town. When Taro learns that Tsubasa stole someone's bread and ate it from an undelivered mail, Taro drags him to apologize to the owner and they help clean a bathroom to make amends for the stolen goods. When the other members ask what crime Tsubasa committed, he's unable to reveal the truth, as it's part of the condition of getting his girlfriend back. Despite the suspicion of the other members, Taro believes that Tsubasa is a good person who isn't actually a criminal. When Tsubasa ate the food out of the package, he kept the postage label because he wanted to make amends. That's not something that a self-interested criminal would do. Taro understands that Tsubasa only took the contents out of desperation to survive, as opposed to ill intent to take something that's not his. When Taro is explaining that he doesn't understand the meaning of happiness, he says that he does his best to make others happy, so that maybe one day he can learn to feel happiness and be happy. This reminds Tsukasa that he hasn't let himself feel happy in a while, and he forgot that it's his birthday today. This triggers a childhood memory for Taro where he remembers celebrating his birthday alone because nobody wanted to come play with him, so he celebrated his birthday alone, late at night, with his father. Not a friend in sight. The Donbrothers all have cake together, and each member gives their strawberry topping from their slice of cake to Tsubasa to make him happy. Tsubasa starts crying because it's been a long time since anyone's shown him compassion and kindness, and it bleeds over to Haruka later in the episode, where she takes joy in serving coffee to a cafe patron at the end of the episode. She ponders the meaning of Taro's words, what it means to be happy by making others happy, which gives her an idea of the kind of person that Momoi Taro is. This episode is kind of gut-wrenching because it's as if Taro is fighting to make others happy because he doesn't want them to feel like they're missing some of the things he missed as a child. Not having friends, not having someone in your corner, and just not feeling happy, which is something he acknowledges he doesn't fully understand. Every episode is just so emotionally deep despite being a show about spandex-wearing superheroes that are meant to make children cheer as they jump into big mechs and beat up the bad guys, but that's just it. It's this kind of thoughtful writing in a show that's primarily for children that shows how universal its lessons are. I said earlier in the video that children understand complicated ideas, you just have to be good at communicating them. Shows like Donbrothers and numerous other Toku and Power Rangers are deliberately written to be accessible while still having interesting and nuanced ideas like personal development, friendships, teamwork, and so much more. It's not automatically pointless and shallow because it's written for kids. I think that perception is really unfounded. Maybe it's easy to make that assertion because people can be annoying about children's media on the internet, like inane discourse getting blown out of proportion all the time, especially with things like cartoons. But last I checked, the impression a fandom gives you doesn't really change the narrative contents of a piece of media. These shows would not work if they were extremely verbose in their prose or their application of ideas, because it would completely fly over the heads of children and be completely off-putting for anyone who's not trying to read something that reads like a philosophy textbook. Taro's introspection about his feelings makes you cheer for the heroes in the story in a different way than just combining together in a big mecha, which is still sick as hell, by the way. I'm not knocking that. But cheering for heroes in stories is multifaceted. You get to see cool fights, emotional narrative beats, and the gradual progress of the recurring themes and the message of the show becoming clearer each episode gives you a tiny piece of the puzzle, and it's all woven into the fabric of the story, which you really come to appreciate when it's done. I don't want to give the impression that things like cool explosions, mecha, or transformation sequences somehow detract from that either, because I firmly believe that the opposite is true. The good writing isn't buried beneath the colourful visuals and the janky CGI, it's actually complemented by it. Toku series tend to have pretty over-the-top action and quite the visual spectacles in each episode, especially where mecha battles with giant monsters are involved. Some people love it, some people hate it. Everyone's different. While excessive action sequences without any substance can distract from a plot, I've rarely ever felt that this was the case with most of the shows I've seen. The formula tends to be that heroes do something awesome, they learn something important. When these elements are mixed together, it makes the lesson more memorable. In Donbrothers, when Sanai is anxious about her age and place in life, she doesn't just wax on about it for 7 minutes. She goes out into the streets, starts absorbing everyone's youth, which is shocking and surprising for sure, but we're seeing the personification of her fears is doing battle with the heroes in the story. This makes it memorable as opposed to being very played out. The most boring style of education is being preached to without any applied examples or engaging spins on the concepts you're teaching. If you lecture kids about morals and ethics out of a textbook or something, they're probably going to be bored to tears. But if you write stories about heroes and villains, friendships and romance, you can convey a lot of the really complicated ideas in a digestible way that they're going to be receptive to. So the cool explosions, big robots, monsters and all that, it's kind of reductive to say that they're childish elements because they're crucial to the success of your message. You can talk all you want about the lesson you want to teach, but there is no better way to show what the heroes have learned other than to show their newfound confidence and how they apply their new knowledge, working together as part of a team to defeat their foes, and the narrative challenges presented to them in each episode. Whether it's to teach a meaningful lesson or is purely about having fun, I think that these shows always tap into what we need when we need it. Cool explosions, big mechs, surprisingly gut-wrenching storylines, and a visual aesthetic that you won't find anywhere else. I don't know if Toku is going to change your life or even make you smile, but I do know that it reminds me to keep that part of me alive that believes in humanity and hopes for a better future. As we graduate from high school, enter the workforce, face adversities that come with regular expenses, comparisons to peers, and the inescapable dread of trying to be a functional adult, everything is just overwhelming. We don't choose to be born into this world to become part of a rat race, struggling for wealth and power, and that's idealized as making a better life for ourselves than our parents and ancestors. All that stuff is an immense amount of pressure that we never really consented to. Whether it's about our circumstance or some aspect of ourselves, life applies different challenges to different people. Some believe that cynicism and abandoning hope is the only path. It's not ignorance or a lack of self-awareness that drives people forward. To draw such a conclusion about another person just because you don't understand what fuels their motor is crazy. Sometimes hope is all we can really cling to, so that we can brave the storms of the worst moments of our lives. When we're watching shows like Power Rangers or any Toku series, we're finding different things that give us the strength to move forward. Maybe you just want to smile at something cool, maybe you enjoy the simple and enjoyable narrative, or maybe you're reminding yourself that everything is part of a process, and that with each episode concluding in our own lives, we gradually build ourselves up to the person we'd like to be. Yeah, maybe it seems stupid that a simple children's show can remind people of that joy and wonder for life, but it's not unbelievable to me. When I was a kid watching Power Rangers, I had less responsibilities, and I was less self-aware than I was as a teenager. Because of that, people chalk up an enjoyment of these things to nostalgia or longing for simplicity as opposed to having any hardship, but I don't really feel that way. Expenses, expectations, and societal pressure be damned. I like shows like this because they remind me that if I have the conviction to cheer for the heroes on the screen, I should also cheer myself on because I need to be a hero to myself. I'm not the protagonist of the entire world, but I need to be kind to myself. I need to motivate myself to power through the worst periods I'll live through, and I need to protect that childlike wonder and joy inside me, because there's no merit in becoming bitter and cynical and getting upset that others around me don't feel as complicated as I do about adulthood. Having the courage to step towards the future, to overcome my flaws, and just grasping at a future that's uncertain and terrifying, if hope is all I have, then yeah, I'm gonna embrace that. Even if Power Rangers and Toku don't leave me with that same thought-provoking or profound message, and all it does is make me smile, isn't that enough? To smile and enjoy myself in my free time from studies or work, and use that to nudge myself forward? Every episode teaches you something that builds into a larger overarching theme and narrative. In that same way, if we can find the strength to overcome each challenge that comes our way, then we're committing ourselves to hope. A hope that we can attain our dreams, that we can become more than we are. And if we're already a good way into our journey, maybe we're just working hard to keep things afloat. Hope is not about shooting for the stars and having the most ambitious goal conceivable. Hope is simply about believing that change is possible, no matter how granular. Whatever you need from a piece of fiction is going to be different for everyone. I don't need them to find the strength to go forward. I fall in the camp of people who just likes to smile at things that are cool. I can protect the childlike joy and whimsy of my youth because I don't think I'm above simple fun. I think that life demands a lot of vigilance out of most of us. We think to ourselves that if we grind away at whatever it is we're doing for a living, then we can just wait until we have time off to play that game. Maybe we can use our paid leave to go travel or do things for ourselves. I don't think that a mindset is going to fundamentally change your life if all you think about is ideals. But it's never stupid to start thinking that, hey, maybe I can take some time off and relax, be kinder to myself. Maybe I can enjoy some simple things and ground myself in things that I enjoy. Children are often idealized as the stewards that will usher in a great future, and to that end, we do our best to protect their happiness and innocence. And that makes sense, somewhat. But why do we abandon the hope for the future that children still have in their hearts? Why aren't we allowed to feel the same level of optimism? Some people say that it's too cringe or corny to have sincere belief that things can get better, that we can be better. But why? What's embarrassing about believing that the world can change? If I can only make my friends smile and laugh, then that's okay with me. I don't think that I'm here to fundamentally uproot the systems I live under, and I'm not really interested in the rat race that I have to compete in to get a job and be successful. All that stuff is just a headache, but I still look at the world facing forward. As a kid, I believed in the messages those heroes stood for, and it's important for children to have heroes, not because they should imagine themselves as heroes. Instead, they should know that we can all be heroes in our own ways, whether that's being a good friend, being kind to others, helping out strangers in need, or just being good to our family. I get tired of hearing that people only like these shows because of nostalgia and an unwillingness to face reality. A lot of us grow up hearing that our friends and family don't approve of some of the things we do, and for some reason, that molds people my age into really judgmental people that are insecure about those things, projecting that insecurity outward into everyone else. Hope is not naive, and children don't believe in heroes because they're too stupid to face reality. I think that self-sacrifice is something that's romanticized in our society. We're told to create comfortable and prosperous lives for the next generation, but we're never really encouraged to do what makes us happy because that's too self-indulgent. Despite the twists and turns of the narrative of this video, the only conclusion I can reach about Toku is this. If you're willing to open yourself up to cheering for those heroes that may have appeared a long time ago, maybe you can remember what it's like to hope for something. I doubt that watching Kamen Rider Den-O is going to change everyone's life, but if it can thaw away some of the hardened exterior that we've had to build up to survive, then shit. Maybe we can remember how easy it is to love heroes and have hope for the future. Maybe there will come a time where somebody is so moved by the heroes they grew up with that they pay it forward by writing for that franchise that gave them so much joy and confidence as children. Maybe somebody already has. I've been Meatman. I hope you like this incoherent mess of an essay that I wrote while having the worst flu of my life. I know the pacing is all over the place, and some of the things I say are pretty surprising, but I hope my passion came across. That's all I really want. Anyway, sorry I didn't get to upload much in recent weeks, but I'm feeling a lot better now. I appreciate you all supporting the channel, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye. Oh, wait. Join the Discord in the link below. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.